The machine is still humming, not loudly, not dramatically, just a low, steady vibration you can feel through the concrete floor if you stand still long enough. It's the size of a refrigerator, painted that old industrial green they don't even make anymore. The label says 1963. The brand name? Gone. Bought, merged, erased. But the machine still runs. It's a jig borer, precision tool room equipment, built to cut metal so accurately that other machines depended on it to be right. Not close, right. In the 1960s, this thing was the heartbeat of a factory. Aerospace parts, engine blocks, instrument housings. If you needed holes aligned within a few 10,000ths of an inch, this was the gatekeeper. No screens, no touch panels, no cloud updates. Just hardened steel ways, hand-scraped surfaces, and a spindle that spins like it's gliding on glass. Here's the detail that should bother you. The tolerances on this machine, the mechanical precision it holds, are still competitive with modern mid-range CNC units in 2026. Let that sit for a second. A 60-year-old machine, built before the internet, before microchips were common, still matching equipment designed in the age of AI-assisted manufacturing. How? Because it was built around deep mechanical logic. Back then, precision wasn't software corrected. It wasn't digitally compensated. It was baked into the iron. The surfaces were hand-scraped by craftsmen who understood contact patterns the way a watchmaker understands gears. They'd apply blue dye, move the carriage, study the high spots, scrape a fraction of a hair off, repeat, over and over. It was slow, painfully slow, but once it was done, the machine didn't need to think. It was right by design. That's the first crack in the story. In the late 1970s and into the 80s, CNC control systems started taking over. And that wasn't a bad thing. Computer numerical control allowed complex shapes, repeatability, speed. Productivity jumped. Factories could produce parts in hours that once took days. But here's what quietly shifted. Instead of building machines that were mechanically perfect, manufacturers started relying on an electronic compensation. If a surface wasn't perfectly aligned, software could adjust the cut path. If there was slight backlash in a screw, the controller could correct it digitally. On paper, the results looked the same. But the philosophy changed. Before, the machine had to be right in its bones. Now, it just had to be correctable. That sounds small. It isn't. Because when you move correction from steel to software, you also move longevity into something fragile. That old jig borer? It doesn't care about firmware. It doesn't care about operating systems that stop being supported. It runs because the geometry inside it is physically true. Modern machines? When the control board fails and the manufacturer no longer stocks the part, the entire unit can become scrap, even if the iron body is fine. Here's the pivot point starting to form. Picture a production meeting in 1984. The mechanical engineers argue for thicker castings, more hand finishing, tighter factory calibration. The business side counters. CNC compensation makes that extra labor unnecessary. Why spend weeks scraping surfaces when a controller can adjust in milliseconds? They weren't wrong, but they were solving for speed. Speed of production, speed of delivery, speed of scaling. And once speed becomes the metric, deep mechanical logic starts looking like waste. By the 1990s, the apprenticeship pipelines that taught scraping, alignment, and manual calibration began shrinking. Fewer craftsmen, more programmers. Factories didn't need masters of geometry. They needed operators who could run code. Efficiency climbed. But something else quietly dropped. Resilience. Because when a machine built in 1963 fails, you can fix it with tools and skill. When a modern CNC fails, you might need a proprietary board from a supplier who merged twice and moved factories overseas. Stand in front of that old green machine and you feel it. It wasn't built to be upgraded. It was built to endure. So here's the uncomfortable thought to sit with. If technology in 2026 is smarter, faster, and more connected, why does this 60-year-old machine still feel harder to kill? Walk around to the back of that machine, and you'll see something that doesn't exist anymore. Oil lines, dozens of them, tiny copper tubes running like veins to every moving surface. each one feeding a slow, steady drip of lubrication exactly where it's needed. No sealed for life bearings, no maintenance-free stickers, just visible, deliberate care. In the 1960s, machines assumed they would be maintained. That assumption changes everything. Because when a machine expects maintenance, it's designed to be understood. You can see the ways. You can access the lead screws. You can adjust the jibs. Nothing is hidden behind molded panels or glued housings. It's honest about its needs. Modern industrial systems? They're often sealed units. Cartridge components. Swap, don't repair. Replace, don't recalibrate. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because downtime became more expensive than depth. In a globalized manufacturing world, where production lines stretch across continents and supply chains operate on razor-thin schedules, stopping to tune a machine is a liability. Speed isn't just a preference anymore. It's survival. So the design philosophy shifted again. Instead of building machines that could be deeply adjusted and kept alive indefinitely, companies began building systems that could be quickly replaced in modules. If a spindle fails, you don't rebuild it, you swap it. If a control unit glitches, you don't trace the board, you order a new assembly. It's faster, but it breaks the chain of knowledge. Here's where the generational loss begins to show. In the tool rooms of the 1960s, young machinists learned to feel backlash in a handwheel. They learned to hear when a bearing was slightly off. They learned geometry not from a screen, but from resistance and sound. Precision wasn't just programmed, it was sensed. When CNC systems matured, that sensory knowledge became optional. You didn't need to feel the machine. You needed to input parameters correctly. The computer would handle the rest. Again, that's not evil. It's efficient. But efficiency trims the edges off human intuition. And here's the pivot point for this chapter. Picture a factory manager in the early 2000s comparing two capital investments. Option 1, a mechanically overbuilt machine with manual adjustment capacity, high upfront cost, long service life. Option 2, a faster, software-heavy machine, cheaper to assemble, easier to operate, but reliant on proprietary electronics. The second option wins. Not because it's more precise in the long run, because it moves product now. And once that decision repeats across industries, the ecosystem adapts. Suppliers stop making rebuild kits. Training programs drop deep mechanical calibration modules. Apprenticeships shorten. Over time, fewer people know how to truly align a machine without digital correction. The downstream fallout is subtle but real. When precision depends on software layers, you're only as stable as your updates. A bug, a firmware conflict, a discontinued chip. Suddenly the accuracy that once lived in iron now lives in code that can vanish. That old jig borer doesn't fear obsolescence. But modern equipment ages in dog years. And here's the uncomfortable bridge forward. If the people who understood machines at the bone level are retiring, and the machines that replace them depend on systems that expire, what happens when both disappear at the same time? There's a drawer in the control cabinet of that old machine. Inside it, you'll find paper, wiring diagrams drawn by hand, schematics with pencil marks where someone made a change in 1978, notes in the margins explaining why a relay was swapped, why a tolerance was tightened. It reads like a diary. Now open the cabinet of a modern 2026 machining center. You won't find a diary. You'll find sealed boards, ribbon cables, proprietary chips with serial numbers that tie back to a server somewhere else. The logic isn't visible anymore. In the 1960s, if something failed, you traced it physically. Voltage path, mechanical linkage. You followed the cause with your eyes and your hands. The machine made sense in 3 dimensions. Today, the cause might live in firmware, or in a line of code that only the manufacturer can access, or in a license key that expired after 10 years. That's not progress gone wrong. That's progress layered. But layers create distance. Here's where the fallout starts spreading wider than factories. When precision moves from metal to software, ownership changes. You don't fully own a machine if its intelligence lives behind a locked interface. You lease its logic. You depend on updates, support contracts. In the 1960s, a company could keep a machine alive as long as it had skill and parts. Today, you can have skill, tools, and motivation, and still be locked out by a proprietary system. That's a different kind of fragility. And here's the pivot point for this chapter. Picture a factory in 2015. A control board fails on a 15-year-old CNC machine. The mechanical components are fine, the castings are solid, the rails are still true. But the board is discontinued. The supplier merged with another company. The new entity no longer supports that model. A replacement board, if you can find one, costs nearly as much as a new machine. So the decision gets made. Scrap it, not because it can't cut metal, because its digital brain aged out. In slow motion, that's the moment deep mechanical logic loses to electronic expiration. The old jig borer from 1963? Its brain is geometry, and geometry doesn't get deprecated. But modern systems are tied to ecosystems, servers, licensing, vendor relationships, global supply chains. When one link weakens, the whole structure trembles. And this doesn't just affect factories, it shapes how we think about technology itself. We start accepting that machines have lifespans measured in support cycles, not structural endurance. We budget for replacement instead of restoration. We train technicians to swap boards, not to understand circuits deeply. Knowledge narrows. The generational loss isn't dramatic, it's quiet. A retiring machinist who knows how to scrape a surface flat by feel. An electrical tech who can read a relay ladder without software. They leave. Fewer replace them, because the system no longer rewards that depth. Speed over depth, scale over mastery. And here's the question that lingers like that low hum in the room. If our most advanced machines can't outlive a support contract, were they ever truly built to last, or just built to sell? Listen closely, and the old machine tells you something modern equipment rarely does. It doesn't rush. The spindle ramps up slowly. The feed moves steady, almost calm. There's no frantic acceleration, no push to shave seconds off every motion. It was designed in a time when cycle time mattered, but not more than certainty. In the 1960s, industrial engineering chased precision first, speed second. The assumption was simple. If the foundation is exact, production will follow. But by the late 1990s and into the 2000s, the order flipped. Speed became the headline. Throughput per hour, units per shift, output per square foot. The machine that could cut faster, move faster, reposition faster, that machine won the contract, and once that metric dominates, everything bends around it. Bearings are selected not for maximum lifespan, but for acceptable lifespan at higher RPM. Castings are optimized for weight and shipping efficiency. Components are modular, so they can be assembled quickly and replaced quickly. The deep mechanical logic, the idea that every surface should be true without electronic correction, that every tolerance should exceed expectation, starts to look like overkill, and overkill doesn't scale well in quarterly reports. Here's the final pivot point. It's not a single failure, it's a cultural one. Imagine two factories standing side by side in 2006. One runs legacy equipment from the 1960s and 70s, slower setup times, longer calibration routines, but once dialed in, the machines hold tolerance for decades with minimal electronic dependency. The other runs the latest high-speed systems, faster initial output, integrated software, cloud monitoring, predictive maintenance dashboards glowing on screens. In year 1, the modern factory wins. In year 10, the legacy machines are still cutting. The modern systems have gone through multiple upgrades. Control boards replaced, software migrated, entire units swapped because support ended. No headline announces it, no collapse, just quiet replacement. And here's the aftermath no one likes to measure. When industries normalize rapid turnover, capital gets trapped in cycles of constant reinvestment. Smaller shops struggle to keep up. Independent repair knowledge fades. Dependence on global suppliers tightens. Precision becomes something you rent, not something you own. The generational loss of deep mechanical understanding doesn't show up on balance sheets, but it shows up when a crisis hits, when supply chains stall, when a proprietary part can't ship, when a system update bricks production. The old green machine in the corner doesn't care about shipping lanes or server outages. It cares about alignment, lubrication, and patience. So was 1960s technology better than 2026? Not faster, not smarter, not connected, but it was anchored. It was built on the belief that the physical world mattered more than the digital patch layered on top of it. That iron and geometry should carry the burden, not code and contracts. What disappeared wasn't innovation. It was the confidence to build something so mechanically sound that it didn't need an upgrade path. We gained speed, we gained scale, but we lost machines that could survive the companies that built them. And maybe the most unsettling part is this. When precision depends on systems that expire, the future becomes temporary too. That old 1963 machine is still humming because someone built it expecting tomorrow to last. The question isn't whether we're more advanced now. It's whether we still build anything assuming it will outlive us.